Hello, my name is Justine Ryan. I am honored to welcome you all to the screening or the viewing of A Love Song. Welcome to the question and answer discussion that we have with the director, writer, producer, editor, Max Walker Silverman. Um, and it's just so great to have this film here at the ninth annual Bentonville Film Festival. And so glad you all were able to see this amazing film. Before we get into anything, um, on the behalf of the Bentonville Film Festival, I would like to take this time to acknowledge the indigenous peoples of that were forced off of this land and leave their ancestral land, including the Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw nations with ties to the Northwest Arkansas area. We further recognize that a portion of the Trail of Tears runs through this area, and that the Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee, Chickasaw, Seminole nations passed through what we know today as Arkansas during their forced removal. We acknowledge all Indigenous storytellers and residents of our community and region. Thank you. Now it is time, we have the honor and privilege to talk about the movie we all just saw, A Love Song. So, Max, would you like to introduce yourself again and maybe share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thank you, Justine, for having me. So honored to be here and be a little piece of such a cool event. And thank you to all of you behind your screens or TVs or in the theater, wherever you are, for watching our movie. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it leaves the world a little prettier, a little more interesting afterwards. And I hope it sneaks up on you, maybe in moments you aren't entirely expecting it. Um, and yeah, that's just thank you so much for watching. And anyway, my name is Max Walker Silverman. I made this film along with a very dear little group of friends and these two great actors who are real heroes of mine. And I'm born and raised in Southwest Colorado, which is also where I live and where I work, where this movie was shot, about 45 minutes from where I was born and raised and live. So I think of it as a little piece of my home, and it's been a pleasure and no small little bit of a trip to get to spread it around the country and around the world.
Oh no, it's great. Thank you for creating it. Um, I think my first question is, uh, when it comes to the story, what was the catalyst for you to create this story? Because it's a different type of love story, and I really liked that because I think a lot of times we think about fairy tale endings, but this one had a totally different ending. So what was the catalyst for you to create a love song?
Yeah, I wanted to create a love story that is a celebration of love beyond the version of it that we see most often, which is the version that's simply shared with another person. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing and a beautiful, beautiful experience. But I believe it's only one sort of type of love amongst many. And this place, this landscape, it's a place I grew up. It's a place I love dearly. It's also a place that's changed. And in some ways, I love the memory of it, or I love the idea of it. But even though that love isn't always graspable in the moment with that place, it's still this mystical thing that sort of hovers around me and makes life there richer. And I think we can have that amongst the memory of people as well, or the hope for people, or even the memory of a version of ourselves. So, um, yeah, I don't know, somewhere in those little shiny particulates and the experience of falling in love and seeing my parents and others around me kind of fall out of it. All the different ways like lives can be blown to and fro by this little thing, and all the way that like love can make life richer, even if it's only the belief in it or the hope for it. Um, there's all that going on, and then it sort of began to crystallize with my admiration for this actor Dale Dickey, who I didn't know. And I'd seen in all sorts of things and all of these small, tough, wild characters. And she was just, to me, so dramatically like real, like from this, I could just see her in this place. I felt like I knew her. And um, I loved the image of her. And since my broader mission, humble as it is to sort of cast a gentler light on places we don't expect it. The idea of a great actor who's had, brought so much toughness to the screen, doing something very tender, was also really appealing. And that goes for Wes Studi as well, who has this really amazing career. And yet this was something we, we haven't been able to see him do, something we haven't been able to see Dale do either. And it seemed meaningful I just wanted to see it. So that's a very blustery sort of answer, but that's an attempt to be honest. And that's more or less how the idea came to be.
Oh, I think it's amazing because I think a lot of times, I think it's a new thing because we're starting to realize that falling in love, whether it's with another person or with yourself, has no age. Like it's not once you turn 35, love's out. If you haven't found it, it's nowhere, and it shows. Um, uh, People who have already been in a relationship, and it shows like they're both healing, and I loved that because I think a lot of times we it's starting to be a new idea that you can still find love after finding love,
Yeah.
regardless of how the first relationship may have ended. There's still this you're still able to have this spark, and you have almost this couple that wanted to in the past, and just never were able to cross paths, and then years later a simple letter is sent, which I love the idea of letters. I think I always think about, I may romanticize it, but love letters. But this idea of I'm willing to start or try this with you. And I thought that was just so simple. Um it wasn't like sliding in DMs or anything. That I think a lot of people in millennial generation or younger that we do. It was very simple, like, hey, I'm gonna be here, meet me. And I loved that. I thought it was very simple, but it was also very strong. I mean, if I was to get a love letter or a letter like that, somebody beckoning for my love, I don't know how it would feel. I'll probably, oh my gosh, my heart. So I just want to thank you for that. But, and I guess in the sense of, along with the love letters, the music, because the music was spot on with the radio. What do you have a personal love for music that really was like the oil for this engine to keep this story in a way, because it was very much about music, but it wasn't from my point of view, and I love that. I'm also a music lover, I will say that. So for you, was music a huge part of it when creating the story, or was that something you realize later, after either post production or while doing the production?
Music was a huge part of it from the very beginning. It wasn't, I didn't necessarily have this so crystallized in my head at the time, but like I now see that like to me it's part of this movie. It's like a kind of a like little tribute to like the best things in life, I hope, which is like basically like love and food and music. Like those really are the best things, at least I think so. um and Yeah, people written books and poems trying to describe music and what it does, and maybe this is my own little addition to that tradition. But I write to music. I
Mhm.
listen to music all the time. I the way I when I the way I write is to try to feel as I'm typing what I hope an audience will feel as they're watching. And my way to that emotion is through music. So a lot of the songs, there were specific songs written into the whole script, and those were by and large the songs that I was listening to try to feel and understand the mood of each scene. And then as you go through the process of licensing and all, and working with a great music supervisor named Joe Rudge, you discover new things, you find ways and more surprising choices, strange new things. And it's like this really pleasurable piece of the job, which is listening to playlists basically and like diving into sort of lost treasures, initially because they're cheaper and music is expensive, but then ultimately it's this rewarding journey into like underappreciated people, which is what the movie is about too. So that felt very appropriate. And I think radio is a really meaningful thing. You know, I got Spotify, of course, and I got all that stuff, but it's like I think we've all had those moments when a song comes on the radio that hits all the harder because we didn't choose it and we didn't expect it. And I like the idea of a character who has a consistent relationship with that sort of experience. And then I also just I have a love for country, folk, the blues, gospel, and a belief that those traditions are funkier and more complex and both older and more alive and more interconnected than probably most people think. So I hope there's some little bit of that that's communicated through the soundtrack.
I definitely think so. The music was so strong, and it definitely carried in moments where you would think like, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen?" And then the song starts, you're like, "Oh!" So I think I think the music definitely helps, but it's just like in the title, it's a large component of it. Even in the beginning of the film, uh, Dell's character says nothing. And I didn't realize. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm what?" And I was like, "Wait, did she?" And I looked at the time, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it's a good amount, but it was so interactive in a sense of like showing her day to day life at the
Yeah.
campsite, and almost what you could see that she was waiting for something, and so then once it starts to come out, you're like it just it blooms very slowly, but once she actually does say something, I think, was it when she was looking at a book? I think she was the first time she says she's looking at the book with the birds. um and she starts to read it, and it's so funny because now she's starting to realize like, oh, this bird is here. And so I think it was those little moments, or those moments were really big, when it comes to not just how it was shot, but the editing and things of that nature. Because in even using the natural sound of the area as music, I think that's so important because it's definitely a different part of Colorado we don't get to see a lot. I think a lot of times, like, people think of what Aspen, or they think about oh, we're gonna go skiing in Boulder, those areas. Nobody thinks, or they think Denver, but they never think the southern part of Colorado, and that Colorado looks like that. And I loved the different view of the area of the state. And I just say thank you for that, because even the landscape of in the scenes towards the end when she's going through the forest, like, just pure beauty. And I think a lot of times we don't get to see those that level of beauty in certain states. We kind of push it on to other states, and we'll say, well, this Colorado has Denver, and that's it, and just keep going. But you showed a totally different side of Colorado, and that was extremely beautiful.
And I think that hopefully goes along with the character's journey as well. Like, I think it's also a journey of someone like rediscovering the beauty in what's around her. Like those things are there the whole time, but it's through that process of healing that she's brought back into them, and also through being brought back into nature and a relationship with it, that the healing can progress, I hope. And to close that loop about the music and the silence, like especially at the beginning, there's like a side of that's kind of literal to me, because I've always found it so funny, actually, that like that's a neck of the woods that's really treasures like silent toughness in people. And people are often a few words, especially sentimental words, and yet the music is often very sentimental and very poetic. And it's like, maybe that's, yeah, and that's a way for people to say these things or hear these things that aren't so common in conversation.
Great. No, I really loved it. And this kind of because we were talking about the actors, and I want to get into that. When it comes to diversity, um in front of the camera, we can see that the lead actor is a woman, but not just a woman, an older woman. Um and when it comes to with the casting and also behind the camera, um how when it came to diversity, what were the certain things that you knew that you wanted when creating this film? Whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera.
Well, first of all, I think that those are very, what's in front of the camera and what's behind the camera is very related. Um, yeah, the town I grew up in, a town in Colorado, unsurprisingly, is like considered a very white town. And in many ways it is, but I started realizing at some point that in fact, it people said that, and people would say that with like sort of a sense of joking self-deprecation. And what I started to realize eventually was that actually it's like a sense of self-defense, because the reality was it wasn't entirely white. Like it was Latino, like it was native, or it was black. Like there's all sorts of people here, but if we started to pretend like it was something other than just a white town, we have to ask ourselves uncomfortable questions about like people's roles in this place, and like who's working in the kitchen versus who's working front of house. And anyway, rural places and the rural West is so much more diverse than it's given credit for. That's really all it is, and it seemed important to honor that. And I really like the idea of these sorts of places, like this campsite by this lake, where you don't get there all that intentionally. You don't get there really all that by accident either. So you can have all sorts of people from all sorts of places, but they're gonna share something. And because they're so alone out there, they're gonna have to talk to each other. And that's a true thing that really happens. And yeah, I wanted to see that, and maybe it's just how I hope it is, and maybe by like visualizing it, that'll lead somehow towards it being closer to a reality. I don't know. We can get caught up in what our hopes are and what the truth is, perhaps, but I think it's worth trying to paint a hopeful picture. And yeah, and Wes Cherokee from Oklahoma, and like such a, yeah, I mean, talk about history. That is history. So he lives in New Mexico, so that's just a couple-hour drive up. That's his world. And yeah, lost my train of thought a little bit, but
It's fine.
almost
No,
behind it.
when you talked about living in being in that type of area, that camping area, my sister loves to camp, and so we talk about places to camp in different areas. And one thing I do appreciate you showing is black people camping, because we don't see it a lot, and it's not and I would say it may be more particularly in the southern part of the US, like more towards the East Coast, you don't see, just because historically camping isn't something you want to do. And usually in horror movies, when black people camp, it doesn't end well. But I loved seeing the women, the couple, camping, because it just kind of broke this stereotype. And I was like, ooh, look at their RV. Like, I was just so excited that they were camping. And I would say thank you. I really appreciate adding that in, whether you knew it was like big or not. But that really does mean something for black people, or BIPOC people who camp or may be afraid to camp. And you can see they're obviously very much more glamping, but I really appreciate it because it's a different style. But I really liked that. I really liked it. So
It-
my next, hmm? Oh,
no, I just one of the many pleasures of this work is getting to like host people out there and show them my home. And those actors, Benjamin, Michelle, they're like great, largely stage actors, and lived in Harlem. And they were it was so, yeah, it was so cool to with everyone who came out to share the place, especially at that time, which was like fall of 2020, and it had been a tough run. And I think people were, it was nice to get out of the city. And yeah, nice to see people take pictures of a sunset anywhere you go. And
I tell you, a good sunset picture, once you have it, you keep it forever. It's and I mean, just the beautiful landscape. And you mentioned something. So this was filmed during the pandemic. So how was that for the cast? Was it very much because at the point, still learning, there wasn't a vaccine until the following year. But how did you work with that with the cast and with like quarantining and things like that? How did that work for you? Because it's kind of like the norm.
yeah, so we were pretty early in the getting back into shooting, getting back into working moment. And the guilds and the unions were beginning to put out advice and guidelines, which was helpful but also limited, because we were not shooting on a lot in LA or something. Like, we were way out in the middle of nowhere. Testing was still a challenge, all these challenges. So what the approach we wound up taking was to create a bubble. So
Mhm.
everyone who worked came in, quarantined, went through a quarantine test process, and then ultimately joined us out by the lake, where we were staying in a couple ranch houses, right there and beneath the mountain. And it was challenging to set that up, and a little pricey. And I extend my gratitude to all the cast and the crew for going through that whole isolating process. But the great unanticipated reward of it is that once we were there,
Mhm.
once we were, at the ranch, once we were shooting, we were able to really be with each other. In fact, we had to be with each other, and we were really alone out there doing this thing. And, big thank you to uh, the neighboring farms and to my parents for bringing us food and taking the film and keeping us supplied and stuff. But we were able to just be like a weird little theater company out there in the wild, putting something together, and also to be just close to other people in a way that we hadn't been for a while at that point. And in a way that once the shoot ended, we weren't again. We went
Mhm.
back to the strange and challenging world. But um, in a movie about finding community, finding closeness, um, that felt really prescient. And I'm so grateful for that time we got to share, uh, tucked away from the world.
Oh, it shows it was definitely worth it. And small weird theaters are always the best. So
Yeah, I grew up doing like weird hippie mountain theater. like running around with scarves and things. So that's, yeah, I'll always love that.
So I have one last question. My last question is, um, what do you want people to walk away with after seeing this film? Actually, it's a two-parter. What do you want them to walk away with after seeing this film? And also, what's next for you? Is there going to be more? Are we going to see more of what happens next? Or are you going to do something new?
Um, well, for the first part of your question, what I truly want is is man, my partner and I were talking about this last night, and we were trying to figure out how to verbalize it. But um, I think like the great thing art can do is just like lower our defenses to the world ever so slightly. Our defenses against other people, or our defenses against our own feelings, or our defenses against our own vulnerabilities, our own ability to appreciate beauty, to appreciate nature. I do just hope that this movie ever so slightly leaves the world a little more colorful, a little more beautiful, and like maybe maybe a song hits a little bit harder, or like getting a note from a friend like a little more moving. Just I lowers the threshold a little bit to be moved. That's really what I hope. Um yeah, that's the best. And then as for what's next, I don't know exactly, but I'm in Colorado. I'm hoping to just keep making movies here. And hope to be able to work with a lot of the same people. I hope to be able to pay them a little bit better. Um, hope to be able to do it again, I guess. And we'll just have to see.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me, answer some of my questions. We want to thank all the viewers. Thank you so much for whether you're in the theater or you're at home watching a love song. We ask that you spread the word about this film, and make sure you keep a lookout for Max and all of the actors and amazing people that are part of this film, for the things that they do in the future. We hope
Thank
you
you.
all
Thank
have.
you, Justine. Thank you, Bentonville. What a cool event. Honored to be part of it. Thank you for watching.
Oh, thank you for coming.